The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hello and welcome to this week's show of Weighted Donuts. I'm Wayne Unger, and my guest here today is Ed Berliner, or is it Berliner? You're going to have to correct me. I should have asked you first.
Nah, you're good. It's Berliner.
Berliner. Okay. And Ed is an Emmy Award sportscaster, commentator, reporter, has worked with ESPN, Fox, CBS, and Ed, we're happy to have you. Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure to be here, Wayne. Thanks.
So Ed, you're based in South Florida. Let's talk about, Miami Marlins. Let's talk about, they've had some, what's the word? They definitely have an illustrious / infamous ownership history.
I would say infamous would probably work in there very well, at least in the last few years.
For sure, and even parts of their times of their first ownership group as well. There was some unpopular times.
Well, the first ownership group was actually Wayne Huizenga, who was the guy who made his money in garbage collection, and also was very famous for owning Blockbuster Video, which he sold. But Wayne Huizenga is the guy who brought the Marlins to South Florida. At the time, they were the Florida Marlins. And he was more interested in his ownership of the Miami Dolphins at the time. At one time, he had both he had the Florida Marlins baseball, the Miami Dolphins football, and the Florida Panthers hockey. And he had lost interest in the hockey franchise and sold that. And he really enjoyed owning the Dolphins more than anything else. And I don't think he, as a businessman, was very happy with the way Major League Baseball was being run at the time, and it was very difficult to have the team in what was then a multi-purpose stadium, where the Miami Dolphins play now, was a very different stadium at the time. It's undergone several renovations, and both the Marlins and the Dolphins would play in that stadium, and the stadium was not made for baseball at all when it was originally conceived. He had to go through numerous renovations in order to make it barely passable as a baseball park. And I think at that time he just got disillusioned with baseball and left, but he was the reason why the Marlins, with his money, of course, the Marlins won their first World Series. So it wasn't all bad, but then again, like many other franchises do, when he wanted to sell the franchise, he basically dumped salary, destroyed the World Series team, and then went on his way. So that's very common for baseball teams, and it's happened to the Marlins several times where they've had to go through the dumping of salary, and it looks like they're going to go through it again.
Yeah. Tell me, so what is, with all this talk about salary dumping and the fact that they want to get down to $90 million, I hear is the number. It doesn't seem likely that they can put much of a team together with that number if they keep Stanton. What's the perception among the fans regarding that?
Well, the perception among the fans is anger, and it has been for some time. Because of this franchise and the way it's been run, and it's won a World Series, been broken up, won a World Series, been broken up. I mean, the fans here are, what I would say, very jaded at this point, because since the franchise was started in 1993, there's really been very little consistency, which is odd for the fact when you consider that this team has won 2 World Series in that time, which is not all that bad. But the constant back and forth and the constant building and then tearing down has fans exasperated here. With regard to Giancarlo Stanton, if they want to get down to $90 million, they're going to have to get him to somehow restructure the contract, which I doubt he will. I doubt the Players Union would allow that, as a matter of fact. But I also am in the camp that I don't see how they can keep him and move forward unless they build a team around him of minor leaguers, which would not keep anybody happy. There's no doubt that this franchise is about to once again undergo several years of pain for the fans in many ways. And it remains to be seen what Jeter and Bruce Sherman, they're the two owners, Derek Jeter and Bruce Sherman, how long their rebuilding plan is going to take, because the fans down here just won't stand for it. They've left and come back and left and come back, and I think they'll probably leave again if this team, quite frankly, stinks on the field.
Well, I mean, looking at the team itself, it needs a lot. Their farm system is they don't have a great farm system. It's not it's not deep. They don't have any they don't have any kind of front end prospect that can probably bring even a good major league player. Their pitching is their pitching is poor. I mean, they signed Edison Volquez. He'll be out all next year, I believe, or a good part of next year. Really, all they got, is offense. So they would need a considerable amount of money to go into the mix. And so I don't see that happening. Stanton
that's why it's not going to happen. That's why this team is not going to contend for a couple of years. You are right about the farm system. There really are no elite players in this farm system right now. The two guys they have, I mean, they have a lefty pitcher by the name of Braxton Garrett, who's only 19 years of age, and he's going to need a lot of help. He probably won't make the bigs for might not make it for another 3 years. Brian Anderson's a third baseman, who's 23 years old. He's a third-round pick, I think, from Arkansas. And he's shown some good stuff in high A and double A, but he still needs another year or two. And outside of that, the rest of the farm system is pretty much C-grade and D-grade players. So they're going to have to find – the fear is here is they'll have to go back to getting older players who are near the end of their career, pay them the major league minimum, have players and cut some deals where they'll get some high-end prospects from other teams, maybe for Stanton, maybe for somebody else. But if they're going to work at $90 million, they're not going to have much of a team. That's rather obvious. And they're already cutting money wherever they can, and sometimes getting rid of very dedicated people who've been with the franchise for a long time. So I think at this point, Jeter's plan is to start from the bottom, and he's going to have to. I don't know where else he's going to go when you've got Stanton as your best player, and he's obviously going to be wanted by a lot of franchises around baseball.
And he himself has said he doesn't want to go through another rebuilding process. So it sounds as though he'll waive his no-trade clause.
I don't blame him either, because I don't think anybody with his talent needs to be stuck in a dead end for another couple of years. And I think right now the Marlins are a dead end for a guy like him. If you look at the roster, they've got some good players. I mean, but look, Ichiro is not getting any younger. Quite frankly, Ozuna, okay, D. Gordon. You've got a couple of players there that are good, but a lot of them are going to be locked into contracts, and a lot of them are going to have to stay. But I think you're going to see a wholesale dumping come the winter meetings.
Do you think the new ownership is underfunded as ownership groups go?
I don't think they're as well funded as they could be, because obviously there's been a lot of talk about that, and there's also some talk that they were trying to bring some people in late, and others did not want to get involved at the price. So they could be underfunded, but it would be difficult for Major League Baseball to get away with that, because they can't really allow that. This is a franchise that is locked into Miami for the foreseeable future. because they are locked in as tenants of a ballpark, which is costing Dade County and Miami City taxpayers hundreds of millions, billions of dollars by the time it's over. The stadium was a true bad spot for Miami government, where they overpaid for that, and of course, Jeffrey Loria was able to get it handed to him for nothing, basically. But as part of the tenancy contract, the Marlins are locked in, so they're not going anywhere. And it would seem to me that Major League Baseball has got a little bit of a conundrum right now, where they're going to have to make sure that this franchise succeeds, because they really don't have any place else to put it. The Tampa Bay Rays, Bucks, I'm thinking football here. The Tampa Bay Rays are the only other Major League Baseball team in Florida, and they are in the midst of trying to negotiate a new stadium in downtown Tampa. If they don't get that, then they're going to want out of St. Petersburg. I've been told that on very good authority that they will go if they don't get a new ballpark. So then if you put the Marlins in trouble, Major League Baseball is going to be in trouble, because they need South Florida. They need Florida as their gateway to the Americas that they've had. And to lose two franchises in one state would be a blow that I don't know if they would want to face it this time. So they have got some interesting accounting issues coming up.
I mean, when it comes to ownership funding, that's two in a row. I mean, I believe, what was it? I think Major League Baseball loaned Jeffrey Loria like $400 million, gave him a $400 million interest-free loan. Was it something to that effect?
You also have to remember, too, that Jeffrey Loria came in with a tremendous amount of money behind him. He is notorious for not wanting to spend his own money. Back around, I think it was 2012, Major League Baseball lent him $38 million. He was buying the Marlins for $158 million. That was exactly the price John Henry paid for the Marlins 3 years prior to that. Loria got $120 million from baseball for the Montreal Expos, so that put the money back together. I'm sure that loan has either been repaid or will be repaid, simply because the amount of money that he made on the Marlins this time, baseball will get their money back. But it's the future, I think, that they're much more concerned about.
And what about are fans aware of the fact that Derek Jeter himself, he put in $20 million, but he is being paid $5 million a year until he recoups his money? Are the fans aware of that? And if they are, has there been any backlash about that?
There hasn't been much backlash about that at all, because fans, I think, are a little bit starry-eyed at this point to see Derek Jeter come into the franchise. They're hoping that he will change things. He's made a lot of missteps at the beginning, which have not sat well with the fans, firing several members of the front office. Well, not necessarily even the front office. I mean, he came in and fired several people right off the bat, which didn't sit well. Jeff Conine was one of the original Marlins, and he was a special assistant to David Sampson, the former team president. And when Jeter took over, he came in, he fired Conine, he fired Jack McKean, he fired Tony Perez, Dawson. These were all three special assistants. It's not as if they were in a position of making decisions for the Marlins, but they were all pretty well loved by the fan base, and the fan base liked having them around. Each of them were offered new positions, less responsibility, and for lower pay. We're told that each of them were making about $100,000 a year, which is not that much money in Major League Baseball. And the new ownership, Jeter, has come in and said, well, we're going to give you less responsibility, but we're going to give you $50,000 a year. So far, we haven't heard from the other three, but Jeff Conine has said absolutely not. Conine came out, as a matter of fact, late yesterday, and said, that's it, I'm done. And that doesn't sit well with the fans, because he's a fan favorite. He does a lot in his community. He was with both World Series teams. And he's one of those guys called Mr. Marlin, simply because of what he's been and how much he's been with the franchise, how much he's meant to the franchise. So Jeter's making some moves at the beginning which are not sitting well with the fans, but I don't think he cares. He certainly learned about being a brutal owner, if you will, or a very hard-nosed owner from the best, George Steinbrenner, and the Steinbrenner family. And he realizes he doesn't have a lot of money handy, so he's trying to make it work on a shoestring for a couple of years. And I think the fans are probably going to give it to him, but I see a lot of empty seats at games for the next few years.
And what about Don Mattingly's future? Has there been any speculation on that?
I think Mattingly is probably going to be safe for a year. I don't see him being replaced. He did the best with what he could, with what he was given in this franchise. I mean, there's been a lot of talk that Joe Girardi may come down here and Mattingly may go to New York. That's been talked about here on and off for a while. It's now starting to gain a little steam. That wouldn't be a bad idea for the Marlins. I don't know if it'd be a good idea for the Yankees, honestly.
No, I tell you what, I don't see. It wouldn't shock me if Joe Girardi ended up with the Marlins, but I don't see Don Mattingly coming to New York for a number of reasons. One, Joe Girardi was picked over Don Mattingly. He was the bench coach and interviewed for the job when Joe Torre wasn't brought back, and they're looking for a guy, an analytics guy. They're looking for a younger analytics guy. Me personally, I'm not a fan of Don Mattingly, the manager. The other thing is, I don't think they'd want to bring back a guy like Mattingly and God forbid he should fail in New York. He's a New York.
Well, a couple of things to remember here too. Mattingly's under contract with the Marlins for 2 more years. They could release him. Jeter looked up to Mattingly as a mentor in his early playing days, so there's a lot of passion between the two guys. Let's also remember too that Mattingly had 5 very good seasons with the LA Dodgers. Now his overall record is not good because he's been with the Marlins now. But his record with the Dodgers was pretty good. I believe he had like a 602, 530, I think was his record. 602 wins, 530 losses. Obviously, that was during a different time with the Dodgers. But I'm not so sure that Mattingly would not be a possibility for New York. Possibility, but probably not. Girardi, there's been a lot of talk that Girardi may just be burnt out and wants to take a couple of years off. If you were to look at it, too, there's actually some better jobs out there than the Marlins if you're Joe Girardi. Becoming manager of the Washington Nationals might not be a bad idea. Although that organization and their dismissal of Dusty Baker was a disgrace. But it's going to be a little awkward here to get rid of Mattingly. I think they're probably going to ride him for another season. And then he'll have 1 more year left on his contract, and Mattingly may be tired of it, too, because you got to remember, the manager's going to take a lot of the heat here in the next season with a very bad roster.
And the other thing is, I don't see them getting rid of Mattingly right now anyway, because unless they were able to let him go to another job, they have to pay him. So
Right.
it sounds as though the purse strings are a little tight right now.
Yeah, they are. They are. There's no doubt about it that they are. And there's also no doubt that this team is not going to be very good for a while. And that's unfortunately what they've been left in. And again, I mentioned it earlier, the Marlins yo-yo effect, where Wayne Huizenga stocked them up and they won a World Series. And they sold everybody off. And then they stocked up again and they won a World Series and they sold everybody off. And John Henry's ownership here, John Henry only bought the franchise so that he could cut his deal with Major League Baseball to become owner of the Boston Red Sox. It was all a very well discussed and very well orchestrated deal for Henry to own the Marlins, Luria to get rid of the Expos, move them to Washington. Luria becomes owner of the Marlins. Henry goes to the Red Sox. It was very well orchestrated by Major League Baseball, and it's been well known for a while. So here we are again. And the fans are going to love going to that ballpark because it's beautiful and new. I think we're going to slide back into a time again when you're going to see more opposing team fans at the stadium, which is always the case when the Mets come to town, when the Red Sox come to town, when the Dodgers come to town, you have big franchises, the Phillies, certainly. You're going to have that point where you're going to probably have more opposing teams than your home team. But that's what Jeter's got himself into, and I'm sure he knows how long it's going to take to rebuild a franchise. So he's got his work cut out for him, and he's accepted it. So let's see what happens.
What kind of media contract do the Marlins have? Do they have a favorable, radio and TV contract?
They have a radio contract that's now going to be they have a radio contract with a signal in Miami that is not the best. The signal that they have is at 940 WINZ, which is a old-time station here. It used to be an all-news station many years ago, which I actually worked for at the time as a sports anchor. It's a very well-considered station down here, and they are now basically a talk station. The problem with it is at nighttime, their signal changes. For those who are way too young to know, under AM radio has two different signals, daytime and nighttime, because at nighttime, the signal tends to skip the atmosphere and get involved in signals in other areas that are on the same station. If another station at 940 in Alabama could be picking up WINZ down here. So they have to change their radiating pattern at night, which gives them a little bit of a difficulty. They have to use other stations in West Palm Beach and other areas to augment their signal, which they do. They have a West Palm Beach station that picks it up. So they're carried throughout South Florida. Their TV contract is with Fox and the regional here. So they have good contracts. That's not the problem. They're not high-dollar contracts simply because of who and what they are at this point. But people can hear them. People can see them. Their ratings are not bad on television. It's not bad on radio, but I think you might see that being more the choice for fans these days. I don't know if they're going to pay to go to a ballpark anymore. They might just stay home and watch or listen to the game.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? But even with the ESPN contract and and all the other contracts, the bottom line is no major league team is losing money. They're all profitable. So
no, they all will be for some time. Look, baseball is slowly regaining its footing in America. It's taken some time. Certainly the Dodgers and the Astros going at it in the World Series, while some people would have killed to have the Dodgers and the Yankees, what we're seeing in this series is brilliant play. Brilliant baseball. Who knows if we would have had that with the Yankees and Dodgers. But it's very attractive. The fans are slowly coming back. There's a lot of franchises in Major League Baseball that are doing much better. There's some that are doing terrible, like the Tampa Bay Rays. They're doing terrible. I think they still, once again, have led might be a tough way to put it, but led the majors in the fewest fans again for a year. But I think baseball is on an upward swing right now more than it has been. If you look at baseball, and if you were to take out, if you were to take out the Marlins, the A's, and the Rays, and even the White Sox, then you'd have some pretty good numbers. I mean, Tampa Bay gets about 15,000 people a game, Miami about 20, and I think they're probably inflated. But you certainly have Dodgers, Cardinals, Giants, Yankees, Toronto, Cubs, there's Red Sox, Washington. They're all playing great baseball and to capacity in many times. So baseball is okay, and baseball is going to continue to make its money, and that, I think, is what the Marlins are going to rely on, the revenue sharing, which is a big part of their bottom line at this time.
Do the Marlins spend all their revenue sharing money, or has ownership been pocketing as much as it's allowed?
Well, there's a lot of discussion about that that's unproven at this point. There's a lot of people who feel that Jeffrey Luria has been pocketing a lot of that money and has been keeping the roster down. Look, the guy got a stadium for nothing. And so he's able to put more of the overall revenue from Major League Baseball and others into his salary plans. But there's been a lot of discussion as to where that money is going right now. No one really knows.
Now, talking about all the franchises, I recently read some discussion that Major League Baseball is actually thinking of expanding to 32. What do you think about that?
I don't think baseball should expand at this time. I don't think there's any place that's really a natural for them. We've over the years heard talk of putting a team in Orlando. That's not going to happen. That would just be kind of cutting the baby in half down here. I don't know where Major League Baseball would go where they would be guaranteed to have a really good fan base. Only one place comes to mind, and that's Montreal, which of course is a legendary place for Major League Baseball. But they have no place to play at this time. They have no contracts. I think Major League Baseball might want to be satisfied with its 30 for a while because, again, Tampa Bay may move, so that's going to put them somewhere. There's been talk about Virginia, near Washington. I don't think the Nationals would allow that. And if you look at other areas, there wouldn't be a natural fit someplace in a major city or a major metropolitan area that needs to be filled. Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, or Charlotte, North Carolina don't make any sense at all. You don't have a proven track record there. If Major League Baseball wants to expand, I'd really love to see the studies on where they would go and why it would be so good, because I don't see it.
I personally don't see it either. The two cities I hear talked about are actually Montreal and Portland, Oregon. But again, I don't see it. I feel as though Tampa is on very shaky ground, and it's not a guarantee that they'll get a new stadium. There's also a lot of financial implications if they do break their lease, and I think they forfeit like 50% of something about a land deal, and they forfeit 50% of their profits for the land, for the land deals surrounding the stadium. It was something to that effect. So there's huge financial implications to the ownership itself should they actually do get a new stadium. But
well, the biggest problem is, again, you've hit on, is stadiums. Montreal is first. Let me deal with Portland. Portland has basically when baseball left, when the minor league team left years ago, they have a minor league stadium that they turned into a soccer stadium, and the soccer does very well in Portland. The only thing they have there is a short season rookie ball out in the suburbs, and getting a major league stadium built there would be nearly impossible at this point in the overall scheme of things. Montreal, again, trouble getting a stadium built was a big problem as to why they moved in the first place. I mentioned Charlotte, North Carolina. They have a minor league ballpark downtown, but they have nothing else. If baseball is looking at this logically and with an intelligent eye, it will tell you that there is no place to go right now that makes complete sense, where the fan base would want it, where the tax base would allow it. Because I'm a huge opponent of building any arena, stadium, whatever, with taxpayer dollars. I think 90% of it has to come from ownership, and that's not going to happen. Sacramento has been screaming for years they're not going to get one. Orlando's not going to get it. Charlotte's not going to get it. Portland's not going to get it. There's been some talk of Mexico City. That's not going to happen. There's way too many issues there. San Antonio thought about it. They're not going to get it. Las Vegas is not going to want a baseball team. Baseball really is out of places to go at this time, and expansion, I think, would be disastrous.
I agree. And, and it's funny, even when the baseball owners finance their own stadiums, fans don't realize that it's just fluff. It's just cover because the taxpayers pretty much end up paying the bill anyway. They get exemption from real estate taxes. They get infrastructure surrounding the stadiums built up. They get perks they get other types of tax perks, whether it be for concession sales and on and on and on. So what the average fan doesn't realize is we're paying for it anyway. It's just doing it a different way. In other words, they're not letting you know you're getting it stuck. So,
right.
But I agree. So, and one other thing, tell me something. What did you think of Girardi's tenure with the Marlins when he was with them?
Well, again, what we're dealing with here is a very difficult time. When you talk about ownership, I never thought that Girardi had the team in his hand. I think it's difficult, because you got to remember that he replaced Jack McKean. He came in and he tried to be Steinbrenner with the organization, and it didn't work, at least with the players. However, he had the lowest payroll in Major League Baseball, and he became a wild card. Now that says something. They only had a $15 million payroll that year. The big thing that happened there was he got into a fight, a spitting contest with the owner, Jeffrey Luria, which is not hard. Luria is not a nice man. He's not a good man. He's not a good businessman. He's considered a con artist by many people. And that pretty much took him out of position. I mean, look, he won 2006 Manager of the Year, and they fired him. So I think that Girardi could have been much more with the Marlins had he simply had the opportunity to do some more work, but he was undermined by the owner at every stretch possible, and I don't think he was given a chance to succeed. Look, he might get the other chance again. When you get Manager of the Year for managing a ball club that was as bad as they were to a wild card, that says something.
Now, Girardi there was a little situation when Luria was yelling at the umpire when Girardi had gotten ejected for arguing balls and strikes, and Girardi allegedly told Luria to be quiet. Do you think that sealed his fate?
Yes, that's the incident I was talking about. That's when Luria was going after Larry Vanover, the home plate umpire, at a game. Girardi was warned. Girardi and his bench coach at the time, Gary Tuck, were the ones who told Luria, "You got to shut up." And Luria was going to fire Girardi right after the game. He was ready to. He had told people, he said, "That's it, I'm firing him." But he had to be talked out of it. But then they fired out in August, and they fired him anyway in October. So Luria is a pompous windbag who helped to destroy this franchise, who conned the city of Miami into giving him a ballpark, who got rich in the process and leaves Miami dumped off with a team and a franchise that's going to stink for a few years. He's one of the more disreputable owners who ever owned a Major League Baseball team.
I couldn't agree more. Quite frankly, couldn't agree more. So, and do you think Giancarlo Stanton will win the MVP this year?
No, it's a pretty good shot. I mean, if you look at what he did for this team on a bad team, I mean, he certainly has the numbers. It's a good question. There's always Joey Votto of the Reds, Charlie Blackmon from the Rockies. He's got others that he's in there working on and up against, but I don't know. It's look, 59 home runs and 132 RBI, and being the only guy who really was on that team that did much, the only guy. To me, he's the MVP. Without him, the team completely goes in the tank. But always have to remember that even though he's won the national, even though he won the Hank Aaron Award, there's a big difference in the criteria between the two. So I'd vote for him. I don't see why not.
No, listen, I agree. I personally don't like that, that overwhelming sentiment that they like to vote for somebody who is on a winning team or a playoff team. Most valuable is like, where would that team be without him? So if a team won 75 games with him and they would have won, let's say 60 without him, to me, I'm sorry, that makes him just as valuable as the guy who was on a 95 win team that would have won 90 without them. So that's my feeling. It's a tight race this year. Actually, with the exception of the Rookie of the Year awards, the four major awards, are pretty tight. Certainly the MVPs and the NL Cy Young. AL Cy Young is a little tight, but I think Klub is going to get the nod. But and of course, we know Belanger and Judge will certainly walk away with the Rookie of the Year awards. So,
sure.
So Ed, what else? Anything else you'd like to talk about is in regards to baseball?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. I mean, baseball is fun again to watch. I'm liking the Dodgers and the Astros. I'm not a New York Yankees fan, even though I grew up in New York. So it's not as if I was pining for the Yankees to be there. I just want the best baseball. And I think with this, we have the best baseball now. I think we have absolutely the best two teams. I think baseball is in a period of growth. I think people are going to come back to baseball. I don't know if it'll ever be the number one sport in America again. Who knows? That's always a very conflicting thing to talk about. One year it is, one year it's not. But no, I think that baseball needs to stay on its current track, bring up those younger players, and keep the peace. And I'll be happy to go to a baseball game. Although I haven't been to a baseball game at Marlins Park since Jeffrey Luria owned the franchise. So I will be very happy to go back and see baseball again now that Derek Jeter is owned, because I swore I would never step foot in that stadium as long as Jeffrey Luria owned the team.
Well, I have never been to a Marlins game. Now that I'm in Central Florida, but there's a road trip coming next spring.
Good.
For sure.
Good. Take that road trip on down, and you can see a good. You won't see a good team, but at least you'll see one in a decent ballpark. If only they'd get rid of that ridiculous home run structure they have out in center field, which is just embarrassing as hell.
Well, I'm actually looking forward to all the gaudiness of the stadium. Just to experience before they take it down. Sort of like experiencing. I don't wear it anymore, but you know what? I'm glad I experienced polyester in the late '70s. So that's how I look at it.
Good for you, Wayne. I'm not one of those. God bless you.
Okay. Anyway, Ed, thank you very much for coming on, and I hope we will have you back again sometime.
It'll be a pleasure, Wayne. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
And that, folks, is our show. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back next week.